There's no self-development without self-awareness. You can read as many books as you like, but if you can't read yourself, then you'll never learn a thing. The problem is, most of us are not aware of this truth or believe it at all or have any idea how to actually do it. Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about how I managed to do it myself. Recently, I spent a few days at a silent retreat just an hour from home here in Bali. No talking, no devices, just space and time unfolding without interruption. My mind opened up to a lot of writing, mindfulness, and reading. And I wrote most of what you're hearing now on paper, as I do most days, because it's one of the ways I stay connected to my own mind. Writing by hand just feels slower, more honest, and far less performative than maybe typing ever does. Silence is like a drug for me. That's a paradox in itself, which I guess I'll come back to. But the quiet there wasn't unsettling when it arrived and when I arrived at the retreat. It was euphoric, almost immediately so, like a pressure being released. And then as the hours passed, the silence revealed this kind of texture. Birds moving through the trees, insects humming steadily in the background, rain arriving and leaving again, and even farmers somewhere nearby beginning their work. The quiet wasn't empty at all. It was full, but it was precise. The main reason I'm an early riser most days is so I have a few hours each day in peace and quiet before the rest of this island and my household wakes up. As I sat there in the middle of these rice fields, though, at the retreat, and in the middle of nature without a machine in sight, it felt far removed from what now dominates much of Bali. Traffic, construction, noise, movement. It's a place in constant negotiation with itself. Ironic, given the history and heritage of why Bali is, well, Bali. Habituating myself within that culture and lifestyle has made the paradox difficult to ignore. It reminded me how easily we confuse what is closest to us with what is actually true. We identify with our immediate environment, our routines, our feeds, our obligations, and slowly that narrow band of experience becomes our entire reality. Everything else still exists, but it no longer registers. Not because it has vanished, but because our attention has moved elsewhere. Now, I didn't go to this retreat to fix anything. I'm fortunate to have lived through harder seasons before, and this chapter feels steady and generative rather than about recovery. I'm also not trying to perform some version of retreat culture. I've been away on these things a few times, and here in Bali, I've seen how quickly healing can drift into something aesthetic, transactional, and quietly performative even. Silence and solitude for me have never been about escape or renunciation. They are about facilitating a quickly accessible conduit to connect and be mindful. They allow me to notice that I'm thinking while I'm thinking, to feel what my body is doing as it does it, and to experience emotion without immediately having to analyze or improve on it. It's a permission slip to meditate, write, daydream, and rest. A way of meeting myself before the noise of daily life rushes back in and begins to speak louder than everything and anything else. If you're enjoying this conversation and if you're drawn to this kind of slow, reflective discussions we have on this podcast, then I want to let you know about my free closed community book club, which might be something that you genuinely find value in. The Voice Alchemy Book Club is kind of an extension of these types of conversations. Each month, we focus on one of three types of work: a book, a photo book, or a photo critique. And we meet online to sit with it properly, asking ourselves what it's meant to one another, what we can maybe learn from it, what ideas and actions we can take from it, what it's wrestling with, and what it asks of us as viewers and creators. It's a space for deeper introspection, long-form thinking, and really honest discussions around photography, creativity, and authorship. There's no pressure to perform at all, no chasing trends, no algorithms, no need to have everything figured out, just honest, authentic connection with fellow like-minded creators, careful, collaborative looking, thoughtful and meaningful conversation, and a community of people who care about staying with the work long enough for it to mean something. So, if this episode and this podcast genuinely resonates with you, which I hope it does, the book club is a natural place to continue that way of thinking and actually participate for free with others that will be open and welcoming to you and your ideas. You'll find more details via the link in the show notes, and I really hope to see you there. When devices, responsibilities, and endless task lists become the dominant forces in daily life, something subtle really begins to erode. It isn't focus or motivation, it's traction. We stay busy, often convincingly so, yet feel strangely unmoored from ourselves, as though all the movement isn't quite taking us anywhere at all meaningful. Much of what we label as progress can quietly pull us off course, especially when it disguises itself as work or learning or self-improvement. These forms of distraction are the hardest to see because they look sensible and they look productive and even virtuous. But in silence, those disguises tend not to hold up for very long. Without anything external to react against, attention turns inward on its own. Thoughts surface that have been running around quietly in the background. Sensations in the body become more legible. Patterns repeat themselves, sometimes gently and sometimes uncomfortably. This isn't about chasing calm or transcendence or enlightenment. For me, it's about clarity. Awareness doesn't flatter or reassure. It simply reveals what is already there and already present. I've come to think that this is where self-awareness actually begins. Not in insight, theory, books, or the accumulation of ideas, but in the willingness to notice what the mind keeps reaching for, what it avoids, and what it clings to when given the space and ability to do so. You know the biggest problem with a disguise? However hard you try, it always becomes a self-portrait. I see this repeatedly in our book club sessions. We might begin by talking about, framing, technique, editing, sequencing, but before long, the conversation drifts towards something a lot deeper. What keeps returning in someone's images? What feels charged? What is being revealed, often unintentionally? Now, you may be asking, what does this have to do with photography? Well, most photographers don't set out to expose their fears, longings, aversions, or obsessions, yet they do. Photography has an uncanny way of functioning as a mirror long before we are ready to recognize ourselves in it. Patterns repeat, themes persist, certain visual decisions always keep resurfacing, not because they're trendy or fashionable, but because they are resonant. That gap between intuition and understanding is where both discomfort and growth tend to live. You can read endlessly about vision, style, or creativity, but without awareness of what governs your attention, those ideas rarely land where you think they will. Attention is not neutral. It is shaped by what we care about, what we fear, what we desire, and what we have learned to stay clear of and avoid. If those forces remain unconscious, they don't disappear. They simply guide the work from behind the scenes while we tell ourselves we are choosing freely. And this is why this distinction between distraction and traction matters so much. Let me explain. Because distraction is the opposite of traction, right? And traction is from the Latin root trahere, meaning to pull. So to be distracted is literally to be pulled away from momentum or direction. Traction is any action that draws us toward what we say we value. So distraction is any action, no matter how productive it might appear on the surface, that quietly pulls us away from that path. And many of the most dangerous distractions wear this costume of growth and progress. They look like learning, planning, refining, doing, researching. They look like self-development or development generically. But without awareness, they can quietly take you further from yourself while convincing that you're moving forward and that you're improving. Now, I hesitate to frame this as advice, of course, because what I'm describing isn't a strategy so much as more of a shift in relationship. For me, meditation, at least the rational form of the practice, is not a belief system or an aesthetic. It's an empirical tool that can be applied to actual daily life. It trains the capacity to observe thoughts, emotions, bodily sensations, and impulses as they arise without immediately identifying with them or acting upon them. Over time, this changes the relationship you have with your own mind. You begin to notice really what actually governs your attention rather than what you think should matter. And the noticing is what makes self-awareness possible. Now, the beauty of meditation is that it is not confined to a cushion or a quiet room or a retreat. Just sitting in stillness can be powerful, but the point is not posture. The point is mindfulness. And that can be practiced anywhere. In meetings, while walking, while exercising, with your camera, in conversation. And downstream of that mindfulness comes things that matter far more in daily life. Presence, sustained attention, emotional regulation, relief from unnecessary suffering, and at times, a quiet, unforced sense of happiness. Meditation didn't make me a better photographer by giving me ideas, aesthetics, style, or confidence. I believe it made me better by helping me understand myself more clearly and what I really care about. By sitting regularly with my own mind, I began to recognize patterns shaping my creative output, patterns of attraction, patterns of avoidance, restlessness, and control that had been there all along. Through meditation, I learned to stay with discomfort rather than immediately trying to resolve it. And that translated directly into my photography. I became more present with what was in front of me. I became less eager to impose this fabricated meaning, more willing to let images emerge from sustained attention rather than urgency. This didn't require withdrawing from life at all or abandoning ambition. Quite the opposite. My life is still full of projects, responsibilities, goals, and pressures. I'm not interested in renouncing those things at all. Done consciously, those pursuits can be sources of great meaning and joy. But what changed was the way I relate to them. Seeing clearly when ambition tips into rapacity softens its grip. The work stops being about proving something and starts becoming a way of exploring what genuinely matters. At some point, this inevitably turns back toward you. If you create in any form, you've likely seen certain themes, moods, or questions appearing again and again in your work. It's tempting to retreat those repetitions as flaws or stagnation, but they are often invitations. They point towards something completely unresolved, something asking to be deeply understood rather than escaped. Much of what we call growth is just simply movement, more information, more effort, more activity layered on top. None of that, of course, is inherently wrong, but without self-awareness, it can really quietly pull you further away from what you care about most and what from your inner individuality is. You become busy without traction, productive without direction. Meditation offers no final state to reach, but what it offers is the ability to stay present long enough to recognize yourself in your own patterns and to respond with intention rather than habit. When you know what you really care about, truly and not conceptually, your art and your photography begins to organize itself differently. Direction feels earned rather than imposed. The work becomes more coherent, not because you are trying to be original, but because you are no longer distracted from yourself. There is no destination here, no final version of you that is complete. There is only the ongoing practice of paying attention. If there is commitment worth making, as a human and as an artist, it is learning to read yourself with the same care you bring to everything else. Because without that, no amount of learning will ever quite land where it should. Happy shooting. If you stayed with this conversation until the end, there is a good chance you're someone who values depth, reflection, and taking time with ideas rather than just rushing past them. That's the spirit behind my Voice Alchemy Book Club. It's a monthly space where photographers and creatives alike come together to sit with meaningful work, photo books, essays, and long-form projects, and talk honestly about what they're seeing, feeling, and trying to make themselves. It's quiet, it's thoughtful, and intentionally human. There's no pressure to perform, no need to have answers. We're all just figuring it out. It's just time and space to reconnect with others, your work, and your thinking. So if that sounds like something you would benefit from, you can find more information via the link in the notes and the description below. Hope to see you there.